Happy 4th of July to all my American viewers. For everyone else not in the States, this is the day we celebrate not being British and blow up the sky about it. Supers are like fireworks, and it's been a minute, so I thought let's rank every super in the game for PvE, PvP at its best and at its worst. First on the chopping block is my favorite super, Nova Warp. This super is the perfect example of how this list is going to be structured. At its best, it's a PvP super being run with the Astrocyte verse, the Feed the Void aspect, and while on Blink. At its worst, it's being used without any of that and in PvE. Taking the super willingly into a PvE engagement is like using a brick to give yourself a haircut. Volatile on hits, sure, but there are so many better ad clear supers or hybrid ad clear DPS supers in the game. But again, this is a perfect example of how we will be rating these supers. Taking a full average between its PvP and PvE use cases, then weighting it towards where you will be likely actually using this super. So overall, let's put it in B tier. Vortex Nova Bomb is comparable in damage to its more popular Slova counterpart. Just because it isn't getting used as often doesn't make it bad. It just means that it's getting beat by its competition. There are instances where Vortex might be preferred, mainly if you don't want those Seekers from Cataclysm. In PvP, Vortex is slightly faster, making it slightly better for longer range shots or more immediate shutdowns. All in all, not bad, better than Nova Warp in most cases, so A tier. Cataclysm is the de facto one and done super. If Cataclysm Nova were an ice cream flavor, it would be vanilla because it is so basic. But you know what? That's not a bad thing, not in the slightest. Vanilla is the standard for a reason, so Cataclysm is A tier. So while Cataclysm is the vanilla of the superworld, Stormtrance is the rocky road of the superworld. Except someone put literal rocks in my ice cream. Damn it. Stormtrance heralds from a simpler time when supers were successful if they cleared ads and didn't get immediately kicked in the teeth in PvP. Nowadays, there's little reason to ever run this horrible excuse for a super. The best part about this super is its initial shockwave, which can dish out a respectable amount of damage. Unfortunately, because this fires out in a star pattern, it's entirely possible to completely whiff its slam on a targets that are only a few feet away. Not even this super's exclusive exotics can save this from being mediocre. This is a relic of a sandbox gone past. D tier. Chaos Reach would likely be far better if it dealt its damage to a single target faster in PvE cases. This super will still surprise PvE and PvP veterans alike, and its obscurity is more of an indicator of how disappointing the subclass as a whole is rather than the super's individual power is. In PvE, this super practically requires geomag stabilizers to be good, but it's still not awful. Let's set it at low C tier for now. Maybe I'll change my mind about this later. Song of Flame is everyone's new favorite toy, and for a good reason. Not only is this super simply fun to use, but its combination ad clear team support and even some tools for champion and mini boss nuking is sublime. And in PvP, this super pulls its weight as a very real threat on the battlefield. Best of all, a lot of exotics end up working with this thing, weapons and armor, as you are still able to fire weapons, use your melee, and use your grenades. I don't think we need to discuss this further. This is an S tier super. Dawnblade has survived the test of time as a vanilla roaming super. Good ad clear and not have bad damage with certain setups in PvE. In PvP, this super is a skill check on the wielder. There are either bad Dawnblades or there are people running Dawnblade who have mained the super since its inception and will cross map you in 0.2 seconds with an angle and movement tech that you still aren't even sure is real. There is no room for in between. Unfortunately, due to its generally higher requirements to see success, this keeps it around B tier. Well of Radiance was killed by Bungie in the latest nerfs, but fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on who you ask, its death was greatly exaggerated. Is this super worse than it was previously? Yes, but until we get another super capable of supplying direct healing and bonus damage for doing basically nothing, this super will always be on top. And in PvP, this still remains as a deployable middle finger to draw an anti-sea bear circle around a capture point with its faster than average cooldown. It will take a lot to knock this super out of S tier. Needlestorm is like if Nova Bomb went to a daycare center for green spaghetti creatures. High one and done burst damage super with some exotics that can further augment its capabilities. In certain scenarios, this can be an outright better damage super than Nova with its added utility with Strand Verbs. In PvP, this super has a strange tendency to miss targets frustratingly, but still the resulting Threadlings still pack a decent punch A tier. Winter's Wrath is the Warlock's best super in PvP, and it's not even close. This thing is a floating checklist for the Geneva Convention, as it combines the incredible crowd control of Freeze with the ability to safely capitalize on it with a ranged Shatter. The only consistent way to shut this thing down is to use a one and done shutdown super, and even still you might lose. In PvE, unfortunately, it doesn't fare quite as well. Poor damage with only half decent ad clear. Still, Freeze is a great verb to handle certain champs, so this places it in A tier. On to the Hunters. 3-shot Goldie, or Marksman Goldie, is topping the charts right now in PvE. It is quite literally the best there is, due entirely to the combination of Celestial Nighthawk and Still Hunt. You need damage? This thing will blow a hole in something the size of our moon. In PvP, this is a great super, a standard for all roaming supers to be judged by. It one-shots nearly every other roaming super in the game with a headshot, and is only held back by its complete lack of super armor. I would love more dynamics like this to be in PvP, but back to our ratings, S tier. Duh. 6-shot Goldie, however, has fared not quite as favorably. Using a super that is mostly focused on ad clear is not generally the play unless you can get it back in a hurry, which unfortunately with that shot, you can't all that well. Still an all-around rock-solid super with ignitions granting it near infinite ammo, and it's roughly equal in power for PvP compared to its 3-shot counterpart, A tier. Oh man, Blade Barrage. Not a terrible super, don't get me wrong, but a super that struggles to find its place nowadays. Shards of Galador makes this significantly better overall, with little negative impact on your build's neutral game. In PvP, I have seen this super whiff just as much as I've seen this score more than 2 kills, which is just sad. Its greatest strength is its charge speed, which makes it a real contender for low man modes in 3s, and a decent panic button for DPS and spam in PvE. Let's say B tier. No, C tier. I'll think about this later. Arc Staff can block just about everything you throw at it, but unfortunately it has the same problems as some Titan builds in that defense doesn't win games. At least, not often. Half decent ad clear and champion nuking in PvE with an incredible skill ceiling in PvP. If you see someone running this over the next Arc Supers we're going to discuss in PvP, run away. You run the hell away. You are in the presence of a psychopath. B tier. Actually, this isn't as good as Blade Barrage overall. C tier. Gathering Storm used to be an amazing super in PvE and literally the worst super in PvP. However, since the sandbox shifts, it's now a great super for PvE and a pretty solid super for PvP. This super's biggest boast is its area control damage, making it a really good choice for locking down an area for a very long time, with setups like Star Eater skills and such allowing for some pretty good fire and forget playstyles in PvE. A tier. While we're here, let's make 6-shot top of B tier. It looked at me funny. Who the hell thought Storm's Edge was okay in the PvP sandbox? Who sat down and said, hey guys, I think we should make a super that's just Thunder Crash, but bigger, faster, and you get 3 of them? I want names and I want kneecaps. This super is so good in PvP, I am tempted to slam it into S tier. And the only reason I am not is because it's incredibly average in PvE. So I will be reserved and say A tier. Oh brother, Shadow Shot. Such an incredible utility in PvE. Frankly, a perfect representation of the best of Bungie's design prowess. This super perfectly fits into the Hunter's fantasy while supplying something that little to no other things in this game can. Shadow Shot's area lockdown, cooldown speed, suppression, and of course weakening sets this apart for what I think most supers design should go for, as well as great utility and team support. Unfortunately, it's extremely disappointing in PvP, with its best attribute being that it's on Void Hunter, and its other supers are ass. Spoiler alert. So let's say top of B tier for now. Mobius Quiver isn't a real super. It's Shadow Shot, but worse. C tier. Be thankful I don't move you down further. Remember what I said 6 seconds ago about Hunter supers? Well, Spectre Blades are awful. Not only are they arguably the worst super in PvE, but also feel incredibly underwhelming in PvP. I really have no idea if this super can be salvaged outside of a massive sweeping buff to just about everything about it. This super does best when your target doesn't know you're coming, which is literally every super. And unfortunately, the Spectral Blades give off a high-pitched hum and a purple aura when it's near, which means that normal invisibility works better than the supers. Unbelievably bad. E tier. Why doesn't my list go to F tier? Whatever. Silk Strike is a surprisingly viable roaming super for PvE. Half decent ad clear and half decent boss damage. In PvP, its squishiness holds it back significantly, evidenced by how much better it is with the Facet of Blessing on Prismatic. Of course, its biggest draw is its speed. So top of B tier for you. Silence's Squall is a very similar flavor to Shadow Shot with more of a focus on solo damage. This likely is the Hunter's best one and done super in PvP as well, as that Tornado will completely deny a zone for a very long time. Due to its high performance in both PvP and PvE, let's say A tier. Now onto Titans. Sentinel Shield got a buff that made it almost meta impacting in PvE. Unfortunately, there are a lot of supers better than this one, but it's still a good super overall with lots of exotics that can play around it. Its ability to do whatever it would like for either ad clear or as support keeps it from falling too far behind anything else. In PvP, this super will absolutely destroy Guardians with a shield that will outright deny most supers, a ranged attack that will bounce between multiple targets, and a melee for movement and close range damage. Unfortunately, its duration is quite short. That's actually something I'd like to see buffed about it. So B tier. Bubble got destroyed. This super was already struggling to keep up in PvE when Well was its contender, and it was kicked in its peas and carrots so hard it started ricocheting off its tonsils. As much as I hated this super in Trials and other zone control modes, it was nerfed in a way that gave it too little nuance and a lack of real good skill expression. D tier. Twilight Arsenal is again the new kid on the block, and everyone loves it. Not only does it provide the Titan a much needed ranged super, but also some alright utility with its weakening effects. In PvP, this super should be feared, even if it's somewhat easy to avoid. This is currently the only thing keeping the Titan in the door for the high tier play and DPS phases on bosses that can't be meleeed. S tier. Fist of Havoc is so bad it's a joke. This super struggles massively to justify its use over nearly every other super in the game. While it's passable in PvP, there are so many better options and ways to avoid it and shut the super down. It's laughable. Bottom of the list. At least Spectral Blades made you invisible. You can keep Spectral Blades company, Fist of Havoc. Thunder Crash has fallen behind the power creep curve. Still a pretty solid super, all things considered, but it's almost a necessity to run Cuirass of the Falling Star to be valuable in PvE. In PvP, its increase in cooldown really hurts this super as a tempo option for smaller team modes. Still, all in all, it's a great shutdown super, so top of C tier. Hammers are deceptively good in PvP. Lots of healing, lots of damage, lots of range. In PvE, these are very okay, mostly being used for a range damage option on Titans that doesn't require a lot of setup. The best part about these is that they are basically a Sunspot factory once popped, which a lot of exotics can make pretty good extensive use of. Never upset to have these on my team, but there are better options. C tier. Burning Maul is a fantastic super in the right hands and in the right environment. In PvE, this can deal out some sturdy damage and can be terrifying as a threat in PvP, able to trade favorably with most of the roster that it can get its hands on. If the new axes weren't in the game, this is probably the Titan's best all-around super, even without Power Gales. B tier. No. A tier. How's this list looking so far? Good? Cool, let's keep it going. Blade Fury is a melee super done right. Scalable damage for both ad clear and alright boss damage with little needed for any additional exotics to make it work with one projectile tool, which is great. In PvP, this can go on tears, but it requires a skilled hand. A good Blade Fury user can make the world go round. Top of B tier though, because of its melee range requirements, which can be completely shut down by certain encounters, bosses, and team shots. Glacial Quake as a super, I feel like, doesn't get the respect it deserves, because this class's neutral game is frankly kind of bad. As we have already covered at length, Stasis is probably the best crowd control element in the game when it comes to supers, and Glacial Quake turns that to an 11. Its shatter damage is quite literally the best in class depending on the boss. Unfortunately, these situations for it to really shine are annoyingly infrequent. In PvP, this is like a faster, grounded version of Winter's Wrath. This will outright win most duels on any target it can get in range, with lots of movement tools to avoid getting pinned. My A tier's getting a little full. I probably moved some stuff around here now that we have a better understanding of the full picture. A tier for now. So There we go. This is our list. For our absolute best supers in the game, you have 3-Shot Goldie, Well, Song of Flame, and Twilight Arsenal. Below that, we have Slova Bomb, Needle Storm, Gathering Storm, Burning Maul, Storm's Edge, Glacial Quake, Vortex, Silence and Squall, Shadow Shot, and Winter's Wrath. For supers that are situationally good but a bit hard to use, we have Sentinel, Blade Fury, Dawn Blade, Silk Strike, 6-Shot Goldie, Nova Warp, and Blade Barrage. For supers that lag behind but still get the job done, we have Thunder Crash, Hammers, Pole Dancer, Kamehameha, and Quiver. For supers that feel like a shell of their former glory or have otherwise fallen behind the power curve, Storm Trance and Bubble. And lastly, and certainly leastly, for supers that are actively harmful towards your kit, please do not pick these. Your team will thank you. Spectral Blades and Fist of Havoc. I know tier lists are subject to a lot of personal bias, so let me know yours in the comments below. Subscribe for a free slice of cheese. Bless your faces, and deuces.